Okay, so this video is going to be about how to make a combination touchpad puzzle. Pretty standard type of puzzle you see, survival horror games, RPGs, adventure games, where you have a door that's locked by touchpad or a safe that's locked by touchpad, and you have to enter a combination. So far, I haven't done anything other than importing in the images because nothing really to see there. It's just drag and drop from the external folder. This is an empty scene that has just the default camera. Don't mind the error message down here at the bottom. This is part of a larger project file, so that's just from one of the other folders. However, the rest of the project has no impact on what we're doing here. It's just that I'm using one Unity project for all my demo videos now. Makes it easy to go back and add extra videos in case you guys request anything. So we're just going to one by one try and get in these numbers. Now in this case, being a combination puzzle, you're going to see why it's vitally important that the name of the object exactly matches the number. In other words, I didn't call this one button or one object. I just called it number one, and you'll see why that's very important in a few minutes. So first, let's line these up. I'll line up the first couple on video, and then I'll probably jump ahead so you don't have to see the tedious stuff. And we'll just separate these by 2 in each direction, so 2 horizontally and 2 vertically. So horizontally, at least for me, it's going to be -2, 0, and then +2. For the Y, it's going to be 2, 0, and -2. Okay, there we go. Everything is lined up. I just skipped ahead, so you didn't have to see all the tedious positioning. Now next, we need these to be clickable. So highlight the whole group. Typical way of highlighting, you click on the top one, hold shift, click on the bottom one, everything in the middle gets selected. Click Add Component, Physics 2D, Box Collider 2D. By default, the box collider, it's hard to see in this case, but there's a green outline for each object. It automatically defaults to the border of the sprite. And we just need to make sure we choose is trigger because we need them to be triggers. Then we're going to do Add Component, New Script, and we'll call this Click Control. So we're adding the same script to all these. Double click on that. And what we need to do is we're going to have to create a couple of variables. And they need to be static because multiple objects are going to need access to them. So public static correct code, and this will be whatever the code should be. And this is going to be a string. Now it's very important to note, even though these are numbers, we're not saying this is an int, we're saying it's a string. We're not really seeing this as 7,845. It's these characters, the 7, the 8, the 4, and the 5, and there's a difference because we don't want to manipulate these as far as addition or subtraction or anything like that. We want it to actually be those 4 characters. And this is what you, the player, are going to be entering, and we'll start that off as null. Now, for the mouse click, it's its own routine. So it has to be outside of start, outside of update. So it's void on. You can either do on mouse down or on mouse up. Your choice. Functionally very little difference. Now here's what I was talking about. Why it's so important that the name of the object is just the digit. Usually, if you've watched any of my other videos, you'll notice that usually when a script is attached to multiple objects, you have to put in an if statement to determine what you should do based on the object name. In this case, since the object name exactly matches what we're looking to enter, all you have to do is player code plus equals game object, in other words, the object that the script is attached to, dot name. It is that easy. And then what we'll do is, just so you know it's working, we'll put in debug.log. That way you can see at the bottom that it's working. Now, I do want to point something out, and that usually when you see this, the plus equals, you're looking at an increment, like the variable is an integer and you're adding a number to it. This is actually, even though it's the same symbols, it's actually doing something very different. It's known as concatenation, if you've never seen that, because say you press 7 and then 8, well, you're not trying to make 15, you're trying to make 7 and then 8. So that's concatenation, when you're basically taking string characters and you're combining them as opposed to a mathematical calculation. So we'll save that, run it, and watch down here. 1, 2, 8, 4. That easy. So in this case, you save yourself a lot of coding, a lot of if-then statements by naming the object, having the object name match the input that you want to receive by clicking on that object. A lot of times you can't do that, but in the case of this type of puzzle, it works beautifully. Now the only other thing we need is a variable looking to see how many times we've clicked buttons. So have you clicked 3, 4, 5 buttons? That way it knows to check the code that you've entered. So we'll also make this a static, but in this case int, because we do want it to count. We'll call this total digits, and it'll start off as 0. Now in this case, we are using this as a number. It's an int, and it's not in quotes because we actually want to use this number, whereas this is in quotes, so it's being treated like a string. And so we want this to be, so total digits, and again, same coding, plus equals 1. And what we're going to do is in the update section is if total digits equals 4. Oops, sorry, got to do the double equals. Add the brackets, just in case we add other stuff in here. So if total digits equals 4, let's see the best way to do this. I suppose we really can't check the player code here as well. We really need to check that internally. So if total, because this is the only criteria we're looking for, because if this is 3, because it does not match, this wouldn't occur. So we really need this to, we need to do 2 separate ifs. So if player code equals correct, it's not showing up. Not sure why. digit equals 4. If player code. Actually, it's black now, so it looks like it's accepting it. Then, so if player code is equal to correct code, then, whoops, don't do then, sorry, I'm talking out loud, then debug dot log correct. But, so this else is going to be off of the internal, the nested if statement, and not the outer if statement. Else, again, we'll put it in our parentheses because we're going to do multiple things here eventually. So we want player code to be reset to null, and we want total digits to be reset to 0, and we want to put in a debug log to make sure this is working, saying okay, let's put in the semicolon there. So the winning number is 7845. So let's do it right first. Correct. I just can't spell correct. Now we'll run it with the wrong code. Work. So, well, it was the wrong code. I shouldn't say it didn't work. So 7, 8, 4, 5. So let's just look at the log now. See, the thing is, because it's doing the update, it's not doing it just once. It's actually spamming. So let's do collapse. Yeah, you are the weakest link. So perfect. So that easy to put in a combination code. A few things you could do: you could randomly make this be a random selection of numbers, and we could also put in a display at the top to show the numbers you've pressed. So I think we'll do that next. So for the display at the top, this is actually really easy, and again it gets down to the fact that we're using the name of the objects to match the input. So you can get kind of fancy with it, but at least you'll see the basics of how to do this. So we'll just go to game object, create empty, we'll call this display code, we'll do add component, we'll do mesh, text mesh. Gonna drop that character size, it's too big to begin with. Pump up that font size and the actual font, get Arial. And this is one of the things I was talking about when you want to be fancy. You could import various font packs. Maybe you have one that has computer font, so it would actually display like LEDs. So you certainly could do that. So, okay, what we're going to do is we're now, let's just see how that looks for size. Kind of small. So let's bump that up to, if we want to kind of match the size of the numbers themselves. Guess that'll do. Alright, so let's wipe out test. Now, we just need a script for this, and we'll type this display control. Open that up. And then display control, get component, text mesh, text equals. Now we want to use that static variable, so since we're in a different script, we need to refer to the name of the script to let Unity know where to find that value. So click control dot player code. That should be all it takes. So we'll run that. And it clears, so that lets you know that it's reset it. So is it 7845? There we go. Okay, took a brief break there, didn't do anything. So let's now do a few more bells and whistles, because that was the basics. You click on the button, it displays the code, and it can detect if the code is right or wrong. So let's do a few more flourishes that give feedback. Like, for instance, the first thing we're going to do here is when your mouse is over a key, it's going to give information to the player that that you are hovering over that key. So let's go to click control, and just as there's on mouse up, so another routine outside of all the others, on mouse over. Let's just do debug .log. Make sure we're using the right on mouse routine. Yep, hovering. Okay. And let's do on mouse exit. Reason for this is this simply void mouse over detects if something is true. It doesn't detect when it stops being true. So if you do something like you change the color of an object, it doesn't automatically fix itself. You have to tell it, okay, when it's no longer true, then you have to make additional changes. So debug .log, not hovering. Excellent. And the reason why it only shows it once is because it's still collapsed from earlier. So if we uncollapse it, then you can see lots and lots of posts to the log. So let's get rid of some of this other stuff. Well, at least remark it out. That way we're not spamming the log as much, because we know these things are working. No, that's working. Okay. Actually, this will just clear right out. So let's just do something simple. Oops. do is we'll make it like a greenish color. So we'll take out the red. Green will be 1 for 100%. And then when the mouse exits, everything should be 100%. So it makes it green, resets, green, resets, green. Excellent. Now when we click on the mouse, let's have it also in this case, let's have it turn yellow, which I believe is actually 1, 1 like that. And let's put in enumerator. Basically what this does, long and short, is this is another subroutine which is used for the purposes of creating a delay. So enumerator, at least that's one function of it. So enumerator, and you can call it whatever the function is. Wait to change. What's going to happen is later on when I say run coroutine, that will be acknowledged. So new return. Oh, it's yield return new, and this is really the important part. Wait 4 seconds. We'll have it wait 1 second, although that's probably a bit excessive. So all this gobbledygook simply says wait 1 second and then do what follows. And again, we'll return the color back to normal. Now what we do, so that was, we want it triggered here when you click. So this will be start coroutine. Oh, start coroutines 1. Start coroutine. And it's called wait to change. Extra set of parentheses in here. So it's start coroutine, open parentheses, the name of the coroutine, another set of parentheses. In other words, that whole thing there. Easy to get tripped up on the parentheses in Unity. Alright, so we hover, turns green. We stop hovering, turns back to normal. We left click. Looks like the hover overrode it. So I didn't think about that. So what we can do is we can just add a check in there. So public static, and we'll do another string. Did click. We'll start off as no. And so what we simply do is we make did click turn to Y for yes, and then we simply check here. So if so if did click equals no, and we'll just forego the brackets for a minute because I want to make sure this is going to work. And then here we would set did click back to no. There we go. So basically what it's saying is this was working, this was being performed unconditionally if the mouse was over, the mouse was exited it. So even though we were running a coroutine, the mouse over was still true, the mouse exit was still true, and so it was still changing the color back to normal. Now it actually checks to see if something else is going on. And see, even though I put the mouse back over it while it was yellow, it wasn't doing anything. So that 1 second might be slightly excessive, like I said, but at least you get the sense now that you can make various visual cues. You could also do audio cues, like on mouse up, you'd also play a click sound. Alright, so I think that's about it for this tutorial. If anything else comes to mind, actually, let's save it as a scene. So, save scene, and we'll call this touchpad, and that way, if there's anything that needs to be done, we can pick up from there.